Have you ever sat at a table full of people you love and felt like your voice just didn't fit in the room anymore? That was me, just a little while ago. We were all gathered in the living room, my children, their spouses, and even two of the grandkids who were old enough to sit still for more than 5 minutes. It was a family meeting, something we don't do very often. And the reason we were all there was simple. Decisions needed to be made about the house, about future plans, about me. Now, before I go any further, let me ask, have you ever held back something important because you thought, maybe it's just better if I stay quiet? Maybe you didn't want to stir the pot, or maybe you were just tired, or maybe, like me, you just didn't feel like your opinion would matter much anymore. That day, I stayed silent, and what happened after changed how I see family, aging, and my own place in the world. That's what I want to share with you in this video. Not just the story itself, but the lessons it left behind, ones that might sound familiar to you, especially if you've ever felt like you were fading into the background in your own family. So, there we were, everyone gathered in the living room, coffee cups half full, someone had brought muffins, and there was that awkward sense in the air, the kind that comes when you know you're really not just there for brunch and small talk. My daughter cleared her throat and said, "So, we wanted to talk about some next steps, Dad." Next steps. Funny how two words can feel so loaded. She went on to talk about things like downsizing, moving to a more manageable place, and possibly setting up some part-time help. Nothing outrageous, really. Nothing that came from a bad place. But every word hit me like a quiet reminder that I was becoming a project, something to be handled. They weren't cruel, they weren't pushy, they were kind, and they meant well. But in that moment, I felt like a guest at my own life planning committee. Everyone had thoughts, ideas, suggestions, some shared memories. Others brought up concerns. My son even had a spreadsheet, and I just listened. I nodded, I smiled politely, and I said, "Sounds reasonable." But inside, I had so many thoughts, not angry ones, not bitter ones, just complicated ones. Like, was I really ready to leave the home I built with my wife, the same one we raised our kids in? Was this really the time to talk about caregivers and check-ins and selling off the garden tools? I wasn't sure, but I also wasn't sure I had the right to say no. Here's the thing, when you reach a certain age, and if you're watching this, you probably know exactly what I mean. It's not always about what people say to you. It's what they assume. They assume you're slowing down, that you need things simpler, that you want fewer responsibilities, fewer rooms, fewer choices. And sometimes, maybe they're right, but sometimes they're not. The hardest part, for me, wasn't the talk of change. It was the feeling that my silence was somehow expected, that by saying nothing, I was confirming what they already believed, that I was done making decisions for myself. I remember sitting there, looking at all their kind, worried faces. My daughter had her hand on mine. My son was walking us through the pros and cons of assisted living options. I could feel myself fading from dad to responsibility, and the scary thing was letting it happen. Why? Because I didn't want to disappoint them, because I didn't want to be the stubborn old man who refuses help, because I love them and they love me. And sometimes, when you love people that much, you let them speak for you even when you should be speaking for yourself. But the truth is, silence can say things you don't mean. It can sound like agreement when you're actually unsure. It can sound like surrender when you're really just confused. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying that meeting in my head. Their faces, my silence, the missed chance to say, "Wait, can we slow down? I'm not quite there yet." And I began to realize that staying quiet, even with the best intentions, doesn't always keep the peace. It just delays the moment when things really need to be said. A few days later, my grandson, he's 14, asked if I was excited about the big move. I smiled and said, "Not sure yet, kid." And he looked at me and said, "Well, you can always change your mind, right?" That one sentence stuck with me. I could change my mind. I could still speak up. Just because I didn't say something at the meeting, didn't mean I had to stay silent forever. It is funny how the youngest in the room can sometimes say what we need to hear most. Now, I know I am not the only one who has ever felt that tug of war between staying quiet to keep things easy and speaking up to stay true to yourself. It's not always about being right, it's about being real. So I decided to talk to my daughter the next morning. Just the two of us. No meeting, no muffins, no spreadsheets, just a walk around the block. And that conversation, that changed everything. The next morning, The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get after a big day of family visiting when the dishes are done, the guest towels are a little damp, and the muffins are mostly just crumbs in the tin. I called my daughter and asked if she had time for a short walk. Nothing serious, I told her. I think she sensed there was more to it though. She showed up 20 minutes later with 2 coffees and that look she gives me when she knows I'm about to tell her something important. We didn't say much at first. We just walked around the block, past the same hydrangeas I planted years ago, and the same neighbor who always waves but never stops to chat. It felt good to stretch my legs and feel the morning air. Finally, I took a breath and said, "I've been thinking about the meeting." She turned her head toward me quickly, like she'd been waiting for that sentence. "I want to thank you," I said. "You and your brother. I know everything you said came from love, and I know you're just trying to look out for me." She nodded. "Of course, Dad. We just want to make sure you're comfortable, that you're safe." "I know," I said, "but I need you to understand something. I'm not ready to let go of this house. Not yet." She didn't interrupt. She just listened. I kept going. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to be a burden. And I know it's easier when everyone's on the same page, but I wasn't. I'm still not. I may move someday, and yes, I might need help down the line. But right now, I still feel like I'm living, not just existing. I want to keep choosing what that life looks like. I saw something shift in her face, not guilt, not frustration, just understanding. Maybe a little relief too. She touched my arm and said softly, "I'm glad you told me. And you know what? I was glad too. I hadn't realized how much I'd been carrying until I finally put it into words. That quiet pressure of being the one everyone's worried about. It's heavy. And when you don't speak up, that weight just gets heavier." We kept walking, and I told her a few more things, like how the garden still gives me purpose, how the morning sun through the kitchen windows still feels like my wife saying hello, how I still like hearing the mail slot click and opening real letters. All those tiny things that make a place more than just square footage. She smiled and said, "We forget sometimes that this isn't just a house. It's your home." Exactly. That walk changed something. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no ultimatums, just honesty. And it reminded me our families want what's best for us. Yes, but they don't always know what we think that is unless we tell them. We assume they can read between the lines of our silence. But more often than not, all they hear is agreement. That S. When I started thinking about all the times in life, I'd stayed silent to keep the peace at work, in friendships, even in my marriage. There were moments I held back, things I wish I'd said, and almost every time, I thought I was doing the right thing. But silence is tricky. Sometimes it's wise. Other times, it's a slow kind of surrender. We've lived enough years to know the difference. And if we want our later years to be guided by clarity, not regret, we have to speak. That doesn't mean shouting. It doesn't mean demanding. It just means showing up with your truth. That day, I also called my son. He's the one with the spreadsheet. I told him I appreciated how thorough he was. And then I said, "But next time, I'd like to be part of the planning, not just the subject of it." He laughed, and to his credit, he took it well. "You're right," he said. "We got a little carried away. You're not a case file." He even offered to help me look into some minor home adjustments. I'd have been considering anyway, things like better lighting, a railing near the steps, a grab bar in the shower. Not because I was giving in, but because I was choosing what I needed when I needed it. That's a powerful shift. Choosing instead of being chosen for. And maybe that's the heart of what I want to share with you today. We all reach a point where life feels like it's fewer invitations, more people start asking about you instead of asking you. And it's so easy to slip into the background. But you're still the author of your story. Even if the chapters are shorter now, even if the pen shakes a little more than it used to, the words still matter, and they still belong to you. That walk with my daughter, that short call with my son, they didn't fix everything, but they reminded me that I still had a voice and, more importantly, that the people I love still wanted to hear it. So if you refacing your own version of that family meeting, whether it's about your living situation, your finances, your health, or even just how often you're getting calls from the grandkids, please remember this: your silence may feel safe, but your voice is your anchor. And sometimes, the best way to protect your peace is to speak your mind gently, clearly, and without apology. After that conversation with my daughter and the quick but honest one with my son, I noticed something began to shift. Not just in how they treated me, but in how I carried myself around them. It's subtle, but you can feel it when it happens. I wasn't sitting back anymore, quietly nodding through decisions. I started asking questions, making suggestions, and sharing how I actually felt, even if it wasn't the easiest thing to say. And they responded, not defensively, not dismissively, but with something I hadn't fully expected. Respect. Not that they didn't respect me before, but I think sometimes people, especially our grown kids, don't know how to show respect to someone they're trying to take care of. Their heart's in the right place, but the delivery gets tangled. And when we stay silent, we unintentionally teach them that it's okay to make choices on our behalf. The moment we start speaking up with clarity, even gently, we reset the tone. It reminded me of something a friend once told me. Growing old doesn't mean giving up the wheel. It means learning how to share the road. And that's exactly what it felt like. Not pushing back for the sake of pride, but participating again, being part of the conversation, not just the topic of it. You know, after 60 or 70 years of living, we've been through enough to know which hills are worth climbing and which ones we can let go. That's the beauty of aging. Wisdom isn't loud, but it is firm. It doesn't need to fight, but it also doesn't need to disappear into the background. What I learned from staying silent at that meeting and finally speaking afterward is that love doesn't always need our silence to keep things peaceful. Sometimes, love needs honesty, even if it's a little uncomfortable at first. Now, I don't want you to think this was some magical fix. I didn't suddenly get everything I wanted. We still had more discussions. There were compromises. I agreed to a few home safety upgrades, and I promised to let them know if I ever felt things getting too overwhelming. But this time, those decisions came from me. With them, not for me, without me. One of the most surprising parts, my granddaughter, the one in college, called me a few days later. She said, "Grandpa, Mom told me what you said on your walk. I think that was really brave." And I just chuckled and told her it wasn't bravery. It was just overdue. But deep down, maybe it was brave. Not because I spoke loudly or demanded anything, but because I chose to show up as myself again, fully, not as someone being handled or planned around, but as someone with history, hopes, and yes, still a few opinions worth hearing. So if you're rewatching this and you've been biting your tongue through family conversations, maybe about downsizing or money or health or anything that makes you feel like a spectator in your own life, I want to encourage you. Speak. You don't have to be confrontational. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be honest. And that honesty, it opens doors. It reminds your loved ones that you're not just dad or grandma or someone we need to manage. You are still growing, still learning, still living a life that belongs to you. And that brings me to something else I've come to believe strongly. There is no expiration date on your influence. Even in silence, you carry stories that shaped your family. But when you speak, even quietly, you shape how they move forward. You model what it means to age with grace, but not passivity, with dignity, but not distance. We often think that protecting our children means staying out of their way, but sometimes what really protects them, what strengthens your whole family, is when you bring your full self to the table. When you say, "I'm still here, I still matter, let's figure this out together." And if that means taking a breath before the next family meeting, or writing down your thoughts before you share them, or even asking for a one-on-one chat with your son or daughter, do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It may never come, but your truth, it's ready when you are. Now, before I close this out, I want to leave you with a thought that helped me more than once. You are not a burden, you are a bridge between generations, between stories, between what was and what can still be. Your voice carries weight, even if it shakes a little. So speak it kindly, firmly, and trust that it matters. And if you've had moments like mine where you stayed silent and later wished you had, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Because when we share these stories, we remind each other that we're not alone in these feelings. That silence might feel safe, but connection, even through vulnerability, is where healing lives. If this video resonated with you, give it a thumbs up, and maybe share it with someone in your life who could use this reminder too. And if you want more honest, thoughtful conversations like this about aging, family, purpose, and joy, go ahead and subscribe. We're building a gentle, supportive community here, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Here's to living out loud, even when it's quiet. Here's to being heard. Here's to you.